Nothing for the month? Okay. Good. Good morning. Today's daf is daf Memhei 45. We're going to pick up at the Mishnah. I feel like if the Rav was here today, he would say we dedicate our learning on Memorial Day to those who died defending our nation, our freedoms. So I'll do the same. So the Mishnah begins and says it says as follows: Kadshe ovdei kochavim ein chayavim aleim mishum pigol nosar v'tamei. So we've been dealing generally with karbanos, and we've been talking about karbanos that are brought by Jews. So we know that there is a concept that goyim can bring karbanos. There's a difference of opinion about exactly which karbanos they could bring, but at a minimum, the pasuk is that we learn it out from is written by Ola that a guy can bring a carbon. So what happens if a guy brings a carbon? The Mishnah is saying that there's no halacha of pigol. So if, for example, during the time when the Kohen or whoever it is was shechting the animal, they had in mind a pigol chutz l'zman, that's not, it doesn't happen. Now it's a machlokas in the Achronim as to exactly what does this mean. Does it mean that it is pigol but it just doesn't have kares attached to it? Or does it not have pigol at all? But whatever the point is, at a minimum, it doesn't have kares because it's the carbon of a guy. It does not have pigol, nor does it have nosar. So if, for example, the meat would be left over beyond the point when it's supposed to be eaten, or the murim would be burned. That is not the person who eats that is not chayav kares. V'tamei, someone who is tamei. Who eats a carbon is generally chayav kares, but in this case, because it's the carbon of a guy, it would not apply. A further distinction between the carbon of a guy and a Jew, shochatam b'chutz pater, that if someone shechts an animal, a carbon of a guy outside of the Beis Hamikdash area, pater, he's pater for shchutei chutz. And the Shita Mekubetzes explains that basically we learn from a pasuk that goyim are allowed to bring a carbon outside of the Beis Hamikdash. They're not subject to that rule that it has to be brought in the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, even if it were to, he brings this from the Rabbeinu Peretz. He's saying even if a guy were to bring a carbon to the Beis Hamikdash, if someone takes it outside of the Beis Hamikdash to shecht it, they would be pater from the punishment ordinarily associated with that. Divrei Rabbi Shimon, these are the words of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yossi mechayev. Rabbi Yossi says he's chayev by most accounts, including Rashi. This would mean that Rabbi Yossi disagrees on all of the above. So he would be of the opinion that pigol and nosar and tamei and shchita b'chutz, that all of these things would apply to the carbon of a guy, just like they would apply to the carbon of a Jew. We'll see in the Gemara why Rabbi Yossi has that opinion. Okay, so we'll start the Gemara. Tanu Rabbanan. Kadshe, this is a similar brisa, but in this brisa is going to walk through a lot of the sources for these things. Tanu Rabbanan. Kadshe ovdei kochavim, that if you have kadshim of ovdei kochavim, if you have a guy who sends a carbon, lo nehanin v'lo ma'alin. We're not supposed to have anah from them, but yet we know the halachas of me'ilah are such that if someone has benefit from something that is a property of the hekdesh, that if he does it unintentionally, that's considered me'ilah, and there are corrective actions to be taken. So in this case, we're saying the halacha is you're not allowed to be nene from kadshe of the kochavim. But by the same token, if someone is nana from it, then they're not over on me'ilah. And we're going to see in the Gemara that this is essentially the Torah's concept of me'ilah does not apply. The reason it says lo nanin is because the Rabbanon were masakin that they instituted that people should not have benefit from it. Okay, ve'ein chayavim leim mishum pigol nosar v'tamei. So that's the same as our Mishnah telling us that the halachas of pigol, of the intent chutz l'zman or noser left over, or tamei, someone who's tamei who eats it, don't apply by the carbon of a guy. Now here's something different that wasn't in our Mishnah. Ve'ein osin tumura, that if you have a carbon of a guy, we know the concept of tumura, we encounter it all the time, but the idea that if someone's not supposed to substitute an animal, but if they do substitute it, generally speaking, not only does the original animal that he was attempting to substitute remain with its hektish status, but so too the attempted substitute animal would also have it, and they would both have it. That does not happen in the case of the carbon of a guy, and if someone were to try to do tumura, then the kedusha would not fall on the new animal. Ve'ein meviim nesachin avol karbanan ta'un nesachim. So we talked about this a little bit on Shabbos. We talked about the concept of nesachim that come by themselves. So we discussed the fact that someone could bring a someone could bring to the Beis Hamikdash nesachim and just bring it on a standalone basis, or we said you could do it separate and apart from the time you bring the carbon. So here in this Gemara, the Brisa is making a distinction, is saying as follows: that a guy, a non-Jew, cannot bring nesachim to the Beis Hamikdash on a standalone basis. A Jew can, and a guy cannot. But that being said, if you have a carbon that requires nesachim, so for example, I referenced before, at a minimum, everyone agrees that a guy can bring an olah. So carbon olah requires mincha nesachim, and the idea would be that even though a guy can't bring standalone nesachim, but if he has a carbon that he's bringing that requires nesachim, then he would in fact bring nesachim. Divrei Rabbi Shimon, these are the words of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yossi says, Roa ani bechulon lahachmir. He says, my inclination, or the way I see it in all of them, is that we should be machmir. So all of these things that me'ilah, pigol, nosar, tameh, tumura, all of these things, I would say lahachmir, that there's no distinction between the carbon of a Jew and a carbon of a guy, that all these things apply. Now obviously, the issue of bringing the nesachim is a standalone din, but in everything else, Rav Yossi says it looks to me like we should be machmir. Why? Shenemer behen, because it's written by them la Hashem. So what is this going on? So the pasuk says, Daber el Aaron v'al banav v'al kol bnei Yisrael, that you should speak to Aaron and his sons and all of Bnei Yisrael, and that, by the way, is one of the sources that distinguish between a Jew and a guy, because it speaks specifically about Bnei Yisrael. But the pasuk continues, "V'amarta aleim," you should say to them, "Ish mi beis Yisrael min agar b'Yisrael asher yakriv karbano l'chol nidreim l'chol nidvosam." So it says that ish. That, by the way, is the source for the idea that a guy can bring a carbon, because if it was just a Jew, it could say ish. Why does it say ish and repeats it? So the Gemara elsewhere learns that that is adding a guy. But in any event, the pasuk finishes up, asher yakrivu la Hashem la'olah. That says something that they bring la Hashem. So it shows this pasuk that talks about a guy being able to bring a carbon, nonetheless says that the karbanos covered under this pasuk are la Hashem. They go to Hashem, and therefore the idea would be that even the carbon of a guy should have the same kedusha and the same strictures as are applied to regular karbanos of a Jew. Now, where the Brisa continues and says, "Bamed dvar mamurim." When were these things said? Which is a reference going back on the initial thing that we said by me'ilah. We said that the carbon of a guy is not subject, it said we shouldn't be nana from it, but it's not subject minatorah to the rules of me'ilah. But we say, when does it say, Bekachem is be'ach, Bekachem bedekabayas mo'alin bahen. He says, this is only by Kachem is be'ach, but by Kachem bedekabayas there would be me'ilah. What is this talking about? So we know that if someone were to give an animal, let's say they dedicate an animal, that gets that animal, or let's say you give money to buy an animal, that animal or that money gets kedushas haguf, what's called kachem mizbeach. The idea is that the actual body of the animal has kedusha, and that has kachem mizbeach, which is a higher level than kedushas damim, or what's referred to here in the Gemara as kachem bedekabayas. Is the idea if someone were to give a table to the Beis Hamikdash, so they would sell the table and they would use that for whatever purposes they needed in the Beis Hamikdash, but it has some lesser degree of kedusha. But in any event, what the Brisa here is saying, that we said that me'ilah does not apply to the carbon of a guy, is specifically to those things that fall within the category of kachem mizbeach. For example, an animal that gets sent to the Beis Hamikdash. But if it would be the guy who sent this table to the Beis Hamikdash, so then that's kache bedek habayis. It has kedushas damim, and that is not excluded from me'ilah. And if someone was benefited from that accidentally, he would be in the category of a moel, someone who was over on me'ilah. Okay, so now we're going to walk through the various halachas in this brayso and understand their sources. So the first one, lo ne'elin lo nehenin v'lo mo'alin. We said that you shouldn't be nana from the carbon, you shouldn't have ano, you shouldn't have pleasure from the carbon of a guy, but if you do, you're not over on me'ilah. So as I referenced before, the Gemara says, lo nenin midrabanan, that it's the Rabbanan who said that you shouldn't be nana, because min Torah there is no concept of me'ilah by the carbon of a guy. V'lo mal, and how do we know that there's no me'ilah? The Gemara me'ilah chet mitruma. That the pasuk by me'ilah says nefesh kisimal mal v'chata bishgaga mikadshei Hashem. So it has that word chata, which is chet, and then we have by truma v'shamush mishmarti v'lo yisu alav chet. So you see that it has a that there's a gzeir shava between me'ilah and truma, and we see by truma the betruma ksiv b'nei Yisrael v'lo of the kachavim, that the pasuk is written v'lo yichalalu es kadshe b'nei Yisrael es asher yarimu lashem. This is a reference to truma. It's saying that you should not profane the kadshe b'nei Yisrael, that they separate to Hashem. So you see the idea that it says kadshe b'nei Yisrael, the things that are from Bnei Yisrael, which excludes of the Kochavim. So we see that by the comparison of Me'ilah, the Gzeir Shava of Me'ilah to Truma, that just like you see Truma is relevant to something that the Jew separates for Truma, that just like Truma is only by a Jew and not by a guy, so too the concept of Me'ilah, which is connected by Gzeir Shava, would be true by a Jew and not by a guy. Okay, next halacha, ve'ein chayavim, which was both in the Brisa and our Mishnah, ve'ein chayavim alav mishum pigol noser v'tamei, that if a guy brings sends a carbon, there's no concept of pigol, and if someone eats it, they're not chayav kares. There's no concept of noser. If it gets left over and someone eats it, they're not chayav kares. And v'tamei, if he's a tamei and he eats it, he's not chayav kares either. My taima. So what's the reason that these halachas are so? So we're going to see they all get covered in one fell swoop. And they're really all coming from the halachas of Tumah. How so? Because the Asi Pigol Avon Minoser. That we have a Gzeir Shava, we've encountered this one before, that there's a connection between Pigol and Nosar. So that's a Gzeir Shava. Va'asi Noser Chilo Mituma. And so Pigol is connected to Noser, and Noser through Chilal is connected to Tuma. So we see that all three of these are connected. Pigol to Noser, Noser to Tuma, Ubetuma Ksiv B'nei Yisrael V'lo of the Kochavim. The pasuk that we've the last few days we've been dealing with Vayikra Chav Beis. So the pasuk at the beginning, Daber al Aram Yalbana V'Yinazru Mikadshe B'nei Yisrael, that they should separate themselves from the Kadshe B'nei Yisrael. So you see, it's a reference to by Tumah. It's something that's unique to the Hekdesh or the Kodesh of B'nei Yisrael. So therefore, and not by a guy. So we learn it by Tumah. Tumah is connected to Nosar, and Nosar is connected to Pigol. So that's how we know all three, that the halacha applies in the case of a Jew, but not in the case of a guy. Okay, next thing in the Brisa of Einos and Tumura, that if a guy's carbon comes and he makes a substitution, that the substitution does not take effect. My timer, what's the reason? The iskish Tumura lemaiser behema, because there's a hekish between Tumura, this concept, this parsha about substituting to maiser behema, to the concept of maiser behema. Umaiser behema iskish lemaiser dagon, and he says, and maiser behema has a hekish that connects it to maiser dagon. So where do we see this? That first of all, where do you see the connection of Tumura and maiser behema? Because the pasuk, one of the psukim that writes about Tumura is written, as Rashi points out, Vayohu Tumuraso Kodesh, is written by the concept of maiser. So you see a connection between Meiser and Tumura. And similarly, there's a connection between Meiser Behema and Meiser Dagon. So Meiser Behema is every 10th animal you're supposed to bring it for a carbon, that is connected to Meiser Dagon, which is the Meiser that you give to the Levi, or Meiser Sheni that a person would take up to Yerushalayim. Where is that connection? Because the pasuk says Aser to Aser, and the Gemara in Becharos tells us B'shnei Meiser Sakasim Medaber Echad Meiser Behema V'Echad Meiser Dagon. So in the same pasuk it says Aser to Aser refers both to Meiser Behema, an animal that's brought as Meiser, as well as a Dagon, a produce that's brought, or a grain that's brought as Meiser. So you see this hekish. So therefore, Tamura is connected to Meiser Behema is connected to Meiser Dagon. And so therefore what? Ube Meiser Dagon ksiv b'nei Yisrael v'lo of the Kochavim. And by Meiser Dagon it says specifically b'nei Yisrael, not of the Kochavim. So therefore, by the connection of Tamura to Meiser Behema or Meiser Behema to Meiser Dagon, we see that Tamura does not apply by a guy. Now the Gemara is going to have trouble with this because we encountered this recently. The idea that you cannot have a two-step learning by a hekish. Now you might ask me, we just had this with Tuma, Noser, and Pigol. The answer is that was not a hekish, that was a Gzeir Shava. So Gzeir Shava works differently, that you could have a two-step Gzeir Shava, but a hekish, you're not going to have a two-step hekish. So therefore, this appears to be a two-step hekish, because you have Tamura related to Meiser Behema related to Meiser Dagon, each one by a hekish. So the Gemara says, V'chidavar alamed behekish, chozer malamed behekish. Can you have one thing learned by a hekish and then take it out further so you have a two-step hekish? It doesn't work that way. And it does not work that way specifically by kachim. There's a number of things that are unique to kachim. This is one of them. We've had also that whenever the Torah repeats something by kachim, it tells you la'akev. There's special rules of how you learn things out from sukkim as relate to kachim. And as relates to kachim, this is one of the rules. You can't have a two-step hekish. So the Gemara says, Meiser Dagon chulanhu. It's not a problem because Meiser Dagon. So in other words, when the Gemara is saying is when do you have a problem of a double hekish? Is if both elements of the hekish were to be relating to something to do with kachim. So then it's a violation of the rule by kachim. You can't have a double hekish. But if one element of the hekish relates to an area of law that's not related to kachim, it's not a problem. So therefore, we had a connection. The double hekish was we learned from Meiser Behema. Meiser Behema learns from Meiser Dagon. So we're saying if Meiser Behema, Meiser Dagon both related just to kachim, you would be a problem that you have a two-step hekish. But because Meiser Dagon is not a kachim concept, because what is Meiser Dagon? Meiser Dagon is you have to give Meiser to the Levi, or you have to eat it yourself in Yerushalayim. But it's not something that's given to hektish. So therefore, it's not a problem that you have a two-step hekish because one of the elements of the hekish, Meiser Dagon, is dealing with chulun. It's not by hektish. So the Gemara says, "Al hani chalamandamar basar melamed azlinon, alamandamar basar lamed azlinon ma'ikalim emer." So the Gemara says, okay, but we have a machlokas elsewhere that discusses this concept of the double hekish not working by kachim, and there's a machlokas that does it work that if the ultimate source is not kachim, so then you're allowed to have a double hekish. So then that works well for us because our ultimate source is coming from Meiser Dagon. We were learning from Meiser Dagon to Meiser Behema to Tamura. So both Meiser Behema and Tamura have to do with kachim, but Meiser Dagon, which is the source law, does not. So then it's not a problem because here we're covered. But that's well according to the person who says that as long as the source is not hektish, you could do a double hekish. But according to the one who says that the subject that the case you're trying to learn to, if that is kachim, then you can't have a double hekish. And so in this case, we're trying to learn a halacha of Tamura. Tamura is very much a hektish, a kachim concept. So therefore, it doesn't help if you tell me that Meiser Dagon, which is the source law, is chulin and it's not kachim, because that doesn't matter. What matters is whether the subject, what you're trying to learn to, is kachim, and Tamura is surely kachim. So therefore, that's not a good answer according to that mandamer. So the Gemara says, Eler Meiser Behema chova she'en kavua lo zman hu. V'chova she'en lo zman kavua Yisrael maisu of the kachavim lo maisu. So he says as follows. Now mind you, we're not actually coming and learning something out about Tamura. What we're learning is we're going to learn the connection between Meiser Behema and Meiser Dagon from some method other than a hekish. Why does that help? Because the whole problem is a two-step hekish. But if the connection between Meiser Dagan and Meiser Behema would be something that is not a Hekish, so then it's no problem to take that limud and extend it by Hekish back to Tmura. So therefore, how are we connecting Meiser Dagan? So I'm sorry. How are we learning out? Meiser Behema? So we're saying as follows that that Meiser Behema, which is the case that is connected to Tmura, is a chova. It's an obligation she'en kavul azman, that does not have a time associated with it. Why? Because Meiser Behema, the halacha is that you put the animals through the pen and you hit the 10th one, and that one asiriyah kodesh. That 10th animal is kodesh, but it doesn't tell us when you have to do it. So you're obligated to separate the animal, but it doesn't tell us when you have to do it. So that is a chova. That's an obligation that doesn't have a time, and something that doesn't have a time, that it's something that is an obligation and doesn't have a time, a Yisrael brings and an Oved Kochavim doesn't bring. So now Rashi points out that it's interesting that we talk about whether it has a time or not, but generally speaking, a guy never has an obligation to bring a carbon. We've discussed that a guy can bring an ola if he wants. According to some, he can bring a shlomim or a toda, but it's all voluntary karbanas. There's never a chova. So what are you getting into chova she'ein lo zman, an obligation that doesn't have time? You just say it's an obligation. So Rashi points out that it was better for the Gemara to say chova she'ein lo zman, because there's no exception. There's never a case where you have a chova that has no zman. When might there be an exception? It's not so much that there's an exception, but you would have to clarify. He says, so what would be an example of a chova she'ein lo zman? Sheyesh lo zman would be, for example, Rashi says a carbon olas re'iyah or shalmei chagiga. So something that you're bringing on the Yamim Tovim. So he says that is something that has a zman, because shalmei chagiga and olas re'iyah are only brought on Yom Tiv. So, but it doesn't have a chova. But in other words, then you'd have to distinguish and say that there are cases where shlamim or an ola has a zman, but it doesn't apply because it's mandatory and not voluntary. So therefore, Rashi just says it was easier for the Gemara to point to a case of chova she'ein lo zman that has no particular time. To that is surely not applicable to guy. Okay, the Gemara continues. Ve'ein meviim nesachim. So we said that a guy cannot bring standalone nesachim. If his carbon requires nesachim, then fine, he can bring them. He has to bring them. But if he cannot bring standalone nesachim. So the Gemara says, Tan Rabbanan. The pasuk says Ezrach. This is the pasuk in Bamidbar. Says Kola Ezrach Yaseh Kacha Es Eile Lahakrev Ishe Rech Nichoach LaHashem. So Ezrach so it says Ezrach Mevi Nesachim Ve'enova Kochavim Mevi Nesachim. So it tells you that a resident in Ezrach brings Nesachim, and a guy does not bring Nesachim. So the Gemara says, okay, great. So I have a lima that says Nesachim don't apply to a guy. So maybe it shouldn't apply even when he brings a carbon that requires Nesachim. So the Gemara says, Yacholo Teheo Laso Tuna Nesachim. I might think that even when he brings a carbon ola, he doesn't need to bring Nesachim. Talmud Amar Kacha, that the pasuk says kacha, that you should do it in this way, which tells you that in all instances when you bring a carbon it should be done in this way, even when a guy brings it. So therefore we have one lima that says this is how it should be done. So we say that that's absolute, whether a Jew or guy, and the fact that it says Ezrach tells you that voluntary nesachim don't apply to a guy, they only apply to a Jew, but mandatory nesachim would apply equally to a guy. Okay, continuing. Amar Rabbi Yossi, Ro'ani bekulan lahachmer. Now we're not actually going to analyze those words. We're going to focus on the next words. Bamedvam amurim bekachem mizbeach. So this was the concept. We said that where you have me'ilah, where you have the concept of me'ilah, we said that, and we said me'ilah does not apply by a guy. That's specifically by things that have kedushas aguf, by kachem mizbeach, but is not applicable. The exception is not applicable to kachem berek habayis, and therefore kachem berek habayis would have the concept of me'ilah. So the Gemara says, "My taimo, where do you come up with this distinction?" We learned before a pasuk that said. So we learned before a pasuk that said that that you don't bring it. Because we said chet mi truma, just like truma is b'nei Yisrael, so too me'ila is only by b'nei Yisrael. So why do you say that there's a distinction between kedushas aguf and kedushas damim? The Gemara says kasavar ki gamra me'ila chet mi truma dumya de truma de kedesha kedushas aguf. So he says, where did we learn out that me'ila does not apply by guy? We learned it from truma. Chet mi truma. We had that gzer shava earlier on the daf. So we're saying, so just like truma is something that when someone separates truma, that truma has kedushas haguf. It's kedusha that it actually it itself it has kedushas haguf. It's not just kedushas damim. So therefore, that's the case that we compare truma to me'ila, to say that me'ila applies to a Jew and not by a guy. But kedushas bedek abayis, the kedushas damim. But when you're talking about just kedushas damim, something that has simply monetary sanctity, then that the limud that accepts a guy would not apply, and therefore kedushas bedek abayis, which is dissimilar to truma, would be something that even the carbon of a guy, if someone is moel, if someone benefits from it, they're over on me'ila. Okay, so bottom line, Taner Rabbanan, dam shenitma v'zarku b'shogeg hortza. So we say as follows: that if you have blood that became tamei, that and you throw it, if it's by accident, it is accepted, meaning that it's okay. That now what we're going to see is that this means you can eat the meat. So in other words, so you have dam that's tamei, you're not supposed to sprinkle it on the mizbeach, but if it ends up sprinkling on the mizbeach, then the person's carbon is accepted, and he can eat the meat, and he has a proper kapara. B'mezid amabez, but if he does it, if they know that it's tamei and they go and they sprinkle on the mizbeach, lo hortza, then it is not accepted, and he cannot eat the meat. Now, why am I so particular about eating the meat specifically? And what's this whole concept? So let's first talk about the concept. We've encountered this before, that we learn out that the tzitz is maratza. The tzitz that the Kohen Gadol wore on his forehead, that one of its functions was to take things that were tamei, that got offered, and to tzitz maratza. The tzitz makes them acceptable, and it kind of purifies them for purposes of being accepted. So the halacha is that tzitz is maratza by tumah, and therefore if you have tamei dam that gets sprinkled, you can do that. Now, so minat Torah, that's it. The tzitz is maratza, and therefore you can use tamei dam. However, the Rabbanan were misakin, and they said, no, if you do it by accident, then we say the tzitz is maratza, and you can even eat the meat and do everything. However, because you're not supposed to do it initially, the Chazal say if you do it on purpose, even though minat Torah, the tzitz is maratza when it's something tamei, that the Rabbanan are going to say, no, that's not good. Now, what if the Rabbanan were to say, no, it's not good, and therefore the carbon is batal, right? The problem is that minat Torah, it's good carbon. So if the guy's going to go bring, as Rashi points out, the guy's going to go bring a new carbon, then it's going to be chulun ba'azara. He's bringing chulun in the azara. So therefore, that would be bad if Chazal said the carbon is not mechaper, because at the end of the day, the Torah says that tzitz is maratza, and it is mechaper. So therefore, what we're saying is that while, regardless of whether it's unintentional or intentional, the tzitz is maratza, and therefore the carbon is accepted for the owner. He no longer needs to bring a kapara. But what's the distinction when Chazal said that by accident it's fine, and on purpose no, is by eating the meat? That basically Chazal said, as long as you did it by accident, you can even eat the meat, but if you did it on purpose, then you're no longer allowed to eat the meat. Continues the brisa. Avol b'mezid. Avol b'tzibur. But when this is true that the Rabbanan made a takana and said you should not eat meat. That's true. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. But medvar mamurim. When is it said? B'yachid by yachid. Avol b'tzibur ben b'shagi ben b'mezid hortza. So he's saying, when did we say this halacha? That the Chazal made a distinction and said that on purpose you wouldn't be allowed to eat the meat. That was talking by a carbon yachid, by an individual's carbon. Avol b'tzibur, but when you're dealing with a carbon that's brought by the tzibur, bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid hortza, whether the person, the Kohen, intentionally did the dam or did it by accident, it doesn't matter. It's hortza. Now again, it doesn't mean that he's supposed to do it. If you have dam tameh, you're not supposed to sprinkle it. But it's saying if you do, even on purpose, minan Torah, the tzitz is maratza. Okay, uba'ovdei kochavim. And when we're talking about the carbon of a guy, bein b'shogig or bein b'mezid lo hortze. It doesn't help if you sprinkle the blood. Why? Because the tzitz is not maratza for the carbon of a guy, and therefore you would not eat the meat of this because it's not a valid. The tzitz is not maratza, and therefore it's not a valid sprinkling. So Amru Rabbanan Kamed Rav Papa. So the Rabbanan said this brisa in front of Rav Papa. The Rabbanan said in front of Rav Papa, they said, Kiman, who is this brisa like? The Lok Rabbi Yossi. It must not be like Rabbi Yossi. Why? The Rabbi Yossi, because if it would be Rabbi Yossi, Ha'amar, he says, B'kulan ani roa lahachmir. He says, in my opinion, you have to be machmir on all of these things. So what's going on here is basically the idea is as follows: that the Rabbi Shimon in the Brisa is the one who says that basically, and at some level that's the source also for our Mishnah, that when it's written Bnei Yisrael, that means that it's unique to Bnei Yisrael and not to of the Kochavim, right? But Rabbi Yossi is of the opinion that since we said this earlier, that since the pasuk says La Hashem, it tells you it doesn't matter, even though it's written Bnei Yisrael, it doesn't matter because the pasuk tells you La Hashem to tell you that there's no distinction between the carbon of a Jew and the carbon of a guy. So therefore, the Rabbanan said in front of Rav Papa that this must be like Rabbi Shimon, not like Rabbi Yossi, because Rabbi Yossi would say that we should be machmer and say that the carbon of a Jew and a guy is the same, and then therefore, if that's true that a carbon of a Jew and a guy is really the same, the tzitz should be maratza, whether it's the carbon of a Jew or carbon of a guy. Amalu Rav Papa said to the Rabbanan who said this in front of him, Afilu teim Rabbi Yossi. I could tell you that this brisa is even according to Rabbi Yossi, and although Rabbi Yossi says generally that La Shem tells you that Bnei Yisrael is not, the words Bnei Yisrael don't tell you it's distinct. Shani Hasam, there it's different by blood, the Amar Kra, because the pasuk says Lahem, Lahem v'lo of the Kochavim. It says for them and not for of the Kochavim. So he says, even though it can be written Bnei Yisrael, that gets knocked out by La Hashem. But here, the additional pasuk is written Lahem, for them. Where do we see this pasuk? This is in Shemos. It says, V'haya, this is talking about the tzitz being meratza, but talk about the tzitz generally. V'haya al meitzach Aaron, that it would be on the forehead of Aaron. V'nasa Aaron es avona kadashim asher yakdishu b'nei Yisrael, that the Aaron carries the sin of the kachin that b'nei Yisrael are makdish l'chol matnas kadshehem. V'haya al mitzcho tamid, it's on his forehead all the time. L'ratzon lahem lifnei Hashem, to be acceptance for them in front of Hashem. So you see, it has that added pasuk that says lahem is for them. So that shows you it's a reference to Bnei Yisrael and not to of the Kochavim. So Rav Papa is saying even Rabbi Yossi might agree because you have the extra lahem here. Amalei Rav Huna Breder Rav Nasan Rav Papa. Rav Huna Breder Rav Nasan said to Rav Papa, I don't like what you just said. He says Ela me'ata. But now you have the pasuk Asher Heim Makdishim, which we're going to see in a minute, because that's our next Gemara. Is we learn out from Asher Heim Makdishim that they're Makdish. That's where we learn out the idea that Tuma can apply. So he's saying as follows, that Tuma can apply in certain instances, even though. So, and we're going to see that whole Gemara, but basically it says Asher Heim Makdishim, that they, and this is by things that don't have a matir. But in any event, it says Asher Heim Makdishim, that they're Makdish. We're going to get into this in great detail shortly. Hachinami Heim v'lo of the Kochavim. So too here, why not say that it's them and not of the Kochavim? So you could say Bnei Yisrael is knocked out by La Hashem, but it says Asher Heim Makdishim, Heim v'lo of the Kochavim. But yet we see that Rabbi Yossi argues that he says that Tumah applies even by that Tumah applies even by a guy. So you see that he does not make this distinction of Haim. So if he doesn't make the distinction of Haim, he doesn't make the distinction of Lahem. So the Gemara says, Elam Rav Ashi, you're right. So I'll tell you a different reason why it's unique here that it doesn't apply. Amar Kra, the pasuk says L'ratzon Lahem. So we focused before on the lahem, that it's for them. So we're saying that's not a good diak, because if Rabbi Yossi agreed with lahem v'lo lo avdei kochavim, he would say the same thing about heim v'lo avdei kochavim. But rather, what's the words we should focus on? L'ratzon, that should be for ratzon. V'ovdei kochavim lav b'nei hartzah ninu. And Goyim are not b'nei hartzah, people who have ritzui. Now, if we have some time at the end, there's a very fascinating sugya of the whole idea of whether the tefillos of a guy are accepted. Maybe we'll have time to talk about it. But in any event, the way Rashi understands lav b'nei hartzah la kadosh baruch hu heim, that goyim are not b'nei hartzah ta kadosh baruch hu she'eno misratza lehem, and therefore the tzitz is not misratza for a guy. So the answer is that it could very well be that this halacha that the tzitz is not meratza for the karbanos of a guy might be true even according to Rabbi Yossi, because it says l'ratzon lahem, and of the kochavim are not b'nei hartzah. Now, how you want to translate that? Many people seem to say it as that the Rebbeinu Shalom at some fashion is not looking for to be misratzeh, desired or whatever, or perhaps it has a more technical meaning, which perhaps we'll see a little bit later, specifically about acceptance of karbanos or tefillos or things of that nature. Okay, so up to the Mishnah. Dvarim shein chayavim le mishum pigol, chayavim le mishum nosar mishum tamei, chutz min adam. Okay, so we say as follows. We talked about, we had a Mishnah before that talked about certain categories of things that don't have a halacha of pigol. Why? Because they don't have a matir. So, for example, we said the kometz, or the levona, or the ketores, all of these things were things that do not have a matir. They are, either there is no matir, or they are the matir. And we said that pigol doesn't apply to those things. So now what the Mishnah is telling us is that even though those things you're not chayev for pigol, so if, for example, someone when they're burning the ketores, they have in mind, well, ketores maybe not a good example, but let's say when they're burning the komets, they have in mind something. Well, all of these are complicated cases. In any event, what it means is that pigol does not apply. Does not apply in these instances under certain circumstances, but while pigol doesn't apply, noser and tameh would apply, chutz min adam, except for dam, because blood, we're going to see in Mirz Hashem tomorrow, why they learn out from Sukkim, why blood, even though not only is it removed from pigol, but it also does not have a halacha of noser and tameh, that he wouldn't be chayv kares for purposes of tumah. Or nosar. So in other words, basically we're saying that exception that we described on the prior Mishnah for things that are a matir or do not have a matir is an exception for pigol, but not for nosar and tameh, except for dam, for which dam is excluded from pigol, from nosar, and from tameh. Rabbi Shimon mechai b'davar shedarkan lechol. So Rabbi Shimon says, I agree with you that for those things that are edible, that in fact nosar and tameh would apply to them. Aval ha'etzim v'halavono v'haktores ein chayavim alav mishum toma. He says, but I disagree. He says, I disagree in the case of things that are inedible, because in that list of things that we discussed were things like eitzim, like wood. Levona is the frankincense that comes with the mincha or put on the shulchan. V'haktores. These are things that aren't edible, and therefore you're not chayev for tumah, and presumably also for nosar. So he's saying, I agree with your general rule that there's a distinction between pigol on the one hand and tumah and nosar on the other hand. But just like, for example, dam is excluded, I also exclude all those inedible things. They don't apply, and we're going to see in Mirz Hashem in the Gemara why, how they darshan the psukim to learn that. Okay, so says the Gemara, Taner Rabbanan. Yachol lo yuhu chayavim mishum tuma ela adavar sheyesh lo matirim bein laadam ubein lemizbeach. So he says, I might think that just like, in other words, we said by pigol that in order to have pigol apply, it has to be something that has a matir that permits it either to be consumed by a person or by the mizbeach. So basically, pigol does not apply to a matir itself or to something that has no matir, as we've been saying. So I might think that Tumah should be just like Pigol. Our Mishnah told us it's not like it, but this Brisa is starting saying, my assumption would be, is that Tumah is just like Pigol, and it does not apply in a case of a matir or something that has no matir. Why would I assume that? The Gemara, the Brisa says, V'dinhu, because I'll make a kavachomer to say that it should for sure not apply to Tumah. If it doesn't apply to Pigol, it shouldn't apply to Tumah. Why? Because Umah Pigol, and if Pigol, Shehu Bikviya, that it is, what does it mean that it's Bikviya? Which means that, he says that Pigol is Bikviya, meaning that the carbon, its chatas, is the same whether it is, regardless of his financial standing. So we know we have the concept of a carbon olav yored. A carbon olav yored is you can either bring an animal, or if you can't afford an animal, you bring shtei torim or shnei bnei yona ha'echad l'chatas ha'echad la'olah, that you bring two turtle doves or two doves, and one for an olah and one for a chatas, or you could bring a mincha if the person can't afford it. So all of those things are true by carbon olav yored, but it's not true by pigol. He says ubiyadia achas. So he says that pigol also, if let's say someone ate pigol, they didn't realize it was pigol, and then they find out that they ate pigol, so then they have to bring a chatas. V'loy hutar mechlalo. There's no exceptions to pigol. There's no instance in which we permit someone to eat pigol. So he says in all of those cases, and the reason we're saying those is as distinct from tumah, where these exceptions exist. So if in the case of pigol, where we see that you have all of these strictures, ein chayav v'nolav ela al davar sheyesh lo matir bein l'adam ein l'mizbeach, that there is a distinction, and we say that the only time someone is chayav for these things for pigol is when it is either when it has a matir, but not if it is a matir or if it has no matir. So he says if you see that all of these things apply if you see that these things don't apply, in other words, don't apply by pigol, then tumah, then surely in the case of tumah, this distinction should be in place, and you should say that only things that are that have a matir also are only those things should become tameh. Why? Because tumah shiba olav yored. That first of all, you see that it is looser in the sense that you can have a carbon olav yored. Depends on the wealth of the person who's bringing it. Ubishtei yediyos, and that you have the idea. We dealt with this in the Gemara in Shavuos. Is the idea that in order to be chayav on tumah, that what has to happen is a person has to know their tameh, then they have to forget their tameh, then they have to eat something that's tameh, and then they have to remember that they were tameh. So you have an initial yediyah, and then you have a later yediyah. So you see that tumah has that aspect. V'hutra michlala, and so in other words, therefore tumah is less applicable because you require both yediyahs. V'hutra michlala, and there's an exception to tumah. What's the exception to tumah? Is the fact that hutra b'tzibor. Rashi points out specifically carbon pesach. You see, you can even eat it when you're tameh. If the majority of Klal Yisrael was tameh, that they could not only bring the carbon, but they actually could eat it. So you see that all of these things that it's looser in a certain sense by tumah, and so you would say that if there's a distinction that it only applies to something that has a matir by pigol, so then so too surely the halachas of tumah should also only apply to something that has a matir. Eino din she'eino chayav el davar sheyesh lo matir bein l'adam bein l'mizbeach. So I should make a kavachomer to say that if the cases of pigol are limited to cases where there's a matir, then for sure tumah, which is looser, the halacha should be that it only applies in cases that have a matir, and excluding all these things. So the Brisa says, I would think the opposite of the Mishnah, Talmud Lomar, therefore the pasuk tells us, Asher heim makdishim li, that the pasuk is written, Daber al Aaron v'Albana v'yinazru mikatche b'nei Yisrael v'leichalu Hashem kachi asher heim makdishim li. So it just says, it says kache b'nei Yisrael. So why does it say that they are makdish to me? What's the point of those words? So we're saying that's coming to add that anything that asher hey makdishim li comes to include anything that they are makdish to me. So the Gemara says, okay, so if asher hey, and this was the reference we had before, I told you we'll learn it out, asher hey makdishim li, which included tumah, came to include tumah, so that was the question the Gemara had earlier. But in any event, asher hey makdishim li, that comes to add anything that they're makdish, even things that don't have a matir or are a matir themselves. So the Gemara says, okay, so you're telling me that Asher Hey Makdishim Li says that anything that they're makdish to me applies. So Yachol Miyad. So in other words, I might think, therefore, that even if something has a matir, it doesn't matter because it's everything Asher Hey Makdishim Li, everything that they're makdish to me. So I might think that even things that have a matir, Yachol Miyad, I might think that right away that's applicable. Tamar Lomer. Therefore, the pasuk says that Yikrav is brought close. So what's the pasuk? It says Emor Aleim L'Darosechem Kol Ish Asher Yikrav Mikol Zarachem El HaKadoshim Asher Yakdishu B'nei Yisrael Hashem V'Tumaso Olav V'Nechresu HaNefesh Ahim L'Ofanai Ani Hashem. So this is a pasuk that's written by the concept of someone who eats kachim when it's tameh. So now, how do we learn it out from the pasuk Yikrav? Amar Rabbi Lazar v'chi yeshno geya shu chayev. So he says, the Gemara asks, is this something that requires touching? I'm sorry, that with touching alone he's over on kachim betuma. Why would you think that? Because it says anything that a person draws close to, mikol zarachem el HaKadoshim. So that he says draw close seems to imply that if you touch the kachim, that you're over on this. But is that true? It's not true because it's only by achila. We see in the next pasuk that it's specifically by achila. So what is this word yikrav that he draws close? Yikrav that he draws close. If it doesn't mean literally draw close, elamatam alamer yikrav b'huchsher likarev hakasav medaber. That when it says yikrav that he draws close, doesn't mean that he draws close in a physical sense. It means that he draws it close in the sense that he prepares it to be brought. So what does that mean? So that means that he, it's something that he prepares to be brought. Is the idea that it has its matir. So therefore, this that we say that tumah would apply even by something that it does not have is a matir or does not have a matir, that would only be. He says all of those types of things would only be if it is a matir, it has to reach that stage. So the stage of the matir has to be reached. And if it's not, in other words, when we say Asher Hey Makdishim Li, that it says that it comes to include other things, and the word Yikrav comes to tell you that it has to be prepared, would mean that it gets put in a klisharis. So if it's something that is used in let's say zrika, for example, or in the kometz, which might be a better example, that it's something that's used in that it's only once the matirin are finished that you would have this halacha that it would be tameh. Or if it's not something that has a matir, then once it's put into a klisharis, then at that point Asher Hey Makdishim Li would say that this is something that can become tameh. So the Gemara says, "Haketzad, how does that work? Yesh lo matirin." So this is what I just said, that if it's something that has a matir, misha yikravu matirin. Once the matirin happen, ein lo matirin. If it doesn't have a matir, misha yakdish bekeli. Once it has a klisharis. Okay, so now the Gemara says, "Ashkechan tuma noser minalan." So we say, okay, I found out that tuma applies even by things that you don't have pigul. But how do I know that noser applies even by the things that don't have pigul? So we say, Asi chilo mituma. That we bring that gzer shava, which we had earlier today, which we said chilo mituma, that you learn out from nosar to tuma, that both use the word chilo. So that gzer shava will tell you that even things that don't have a matir, that you're not chayav mishum pigul, that you're chayav for nosar. So the Gemara is saying, okay, well you're learning nosar from tuma, but we also know v'leilef avon mi pigol. He says, but we know that nosar is also connected to pigol because we had this before. You have a gzer shava of avon. So therefore, why are you deciding to look at the gzer shava between nosar and tuma to say that noser does apply even by something that pigul does not apply to. Why not learn from pigul and say just like it doesn't apply to pigul, it doesn't apply to noser? So the Gemara says, mistabra mituma havilei melef shekain gezel. So he says, it makes sense that we should learn noser from Tumah because it has in common with Tumah three things, Gezel. So Rashi says that, first of all, the Gimel is for Guf, Noser v'Tumah psul haguf, upigol psul machshava, that Noser and Tumah both manifest themselves in something physical, that a piece of meat can become Tameh, so a piece of meat can become noser, versus pigol is not a din in the meat, it's a din in the machshava that passes it. Noser v'tumah ein zrikas adam mevin li de psulan. He says noser and tumah are similar in the sense that it has nothing to do with zrika, while pigol has to do with zrika. So therefore, noser is more similar to tumah. Is more similar to tumah than it is to pigol. And he says pigol zrikas dam kavasa b'psul. I'm sorry. He says noser v'tameh. The lamed is noser v'tameh nemer behem chilol. That lamed tells you that both noser and tameh have a gzer shava of chilol together. Now, all right, we don't have time. Okay, so those three things tell us why it makes more sense that nosar and tumah are a pair than nosar and pigol, because of guf, psul, and chilol. So the Gemara says, so it says gezel simon. So the Gemara says adarabba mi pigol havalei lamelef. I would tell you that nosar should be more similar to pigol than it is to tumah. Why? Shekain nosar. The way we read this is shekain hutter. So we take a look at Rashi. Shekain hutter tzitz tahar bizman karev v'hani nefishin. So basically, the Gemara is going to say we have a bunch of things that more things, and you have three elements of commonality between tumah and nosar. I'm going to tell you that there's more. There's at least 5 elements of commonality between nosar and pigol. So you should compare it to pigol. What are those elements? So take a look at Rashi, the second to last medium line. So he says, nosar pigol lo hutra michlalan ketuma. The nosar and pigol has no exception. There's no such thing as saying you can have something that's nosar or pigol, whereas tumah, we know that there's that there's an exception in the case of tzibor. He says the tzitz being maratza is something that's unique to tumah. Nosar and pigol are together in the sense that the tzitz doesn't help for it. Okay, and then Rashi is addressing something else which we don't have time to focus on. So he says tahar. He says shnehem tahorim. He's saying that pigol and nosar are both tahar. They have a psul in their status, but they're both tahar. Ushnehem nifsalim bizman. And both pigol and nosar have a time element to it. Zeb ben nosar chutz zman, v'zeb ben machshavas zman. One of them is because it left over past the time, and the other because you have in mind past the time. V'shneim psulim bekarov la'afuke tumas haguf shepsulim b'makriv. He says, and also pigol and nosar take effect on the thing that was brought, whereas tumah relates to the person who's bringing it. So we're saying you brought me 3 reasons that I should compare nosar to tumah. I'm bringing you 5 reasons that I should compare nosar to pigol instead of to tumah. So the Gemara says you're right. So ella miditani levi. So rather, how do I know to extend this halacha also to nosar, not just to tumah? He says because this is what we learned from Levi. The Tani Levi. Levi says minayin she'af b'psul hazman b'psul zman akasim medaber. That Talmulomer v'lo yichalu. He says, one second, let's just see the shita here. So it says, v'lo yichalu Hashem kadshi asher he makdishim li. So he says that the pasuk is written yichalalu, which tells you, as Rashi points out, that it could have said, Rashi has amended here, could have said that it could have said yichalu. It said Yechalalu. So the Gemara says, "B'shnei chilulin akasim medaber echad psul noser ve'echad psul tumah." He says that where we learn the pasuk, this pasuk that we learn tumah from, has the word Yechalalu, which tells you there's 2 lameds when it could have been only one. Tells you that there's 2 chilulim. So I'll say one of them is tumah, obviously, and the other is noser. Why do I assume that the second lamed is noser? Because we said before that noser has the word chilel, we had the chilul as a gzeir shava before. So when it says yichalalu with two lameds, comes to tell you that you include not just tumah, but you include noser. So we see that even though by pigol you exclude things that are a matir or don't have a matir, by tumah they're included, as we brought the reason before from Asher Hey Makdishim Li, and by noser they're also included because those psukim that are written Asher Hey Makdishim Li says yichalalu, which comes to tell you both noser and tumah are included.